Brooks Koepka is back on the PGA Tour and a lot has changed since he left for LIV. He's got new equipment deals, he's got new technology in the bag, and obviously he's got a hell of a lot more money. But there's one thing that hasn't changed at all. Brooks is still using the TaylorMade M2 High Launch 3-wood. This fairway wood was first launched back in 2017, and Brooks can literally use any 3-wood that he wants. So the big question is, why does he still have this nearly decade-old club in the bag? Well, today, thanks to my partnership with Nearly New Golf Clubs, I'm going to be able to answer that question. I've got my hands on the exact same model that Brooks Koepka has in the bag, and I'm going to be putting it up against the most popular 3-wood of 2025, the Ping G430 Max. And for once, I'm not going to be doing the testing myself. After all, I'm no Brooks Koepka, so I have enlisted the help of the best golfer I know. Ben Campbell is a scratch golfer and he has a much better chance of figuring out why Brooks has the M2 in the bag compared to the Ping G430. I have asked him to hit a ton of golf shots, so without further ado, let's get into it. Before we get into the numbers, there's something very important to consider. Brooks uses the TaylorMade M2 High Launch 3-wood at 16.5 degrees. Now that loft is stronger than a 5-wood, but weaker than a traditional 3-wood. And that tells us something straight away. This isn't a distance-only fairway wood. It's a control club, it's a flight window club, and it's a specific yardage club. And these are three very good reasons to explain why Brooks might have this in the bag compared to a more modern 3-wood. So when we're comparing the M2 against the Ping G430 Max, a modern, ultra-forgiving, high ball speed club, we're not just asking which one goes further. We're asking for what type of performance these clubs are offering the golfer, which is why I needed a better golfer than myself to test these clubs. Now, I asked Ben to hit 20 shots per club, which should give us enough data to compare these clubs fairly. So let's dive into the data. I'm going to start off with ball speed, and we've got the M2 at 146.2 miles an hour and the Ping G430 Max at 146.1 miles an hour. Basically, exactly the same. And that's quite interesting because you'd assume that 8 years worth of technology would produce higher ball speeds. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Now, if we look at smash factor, we've got the M2 at 1.45 and we've got the Ping at 1.49. The Ping is way more efficient. Basically, the Ping is hotter across the face, which makes it more forgiving. But here's the key. Despite the higher smash factor, ball speed was basically the same. So in pure speed terms, the M2 is definitely holding its own. And that's our first clue as to why Brooks has still got this in the bag. He has not given up any speed with the M2. How does that speed translate into distance though? Let's have a look at the carry numbers. For the M2, we've got 238.6 yards, and for the Ping, we've got 239.1 yards. There's half a yard worth of difference between the two clubs. But if we look at total distance, we've got the M2 at 254.9 yards and the Ping at 257.6 yards. The Ping is rolling out an extra 2.7 yards, and that's purely down to spin and launch characteristics. But here's the thing, if Brooks wants more distance, then a modern 3-wood will definitely give him that. But the M2 is basically carrying exactly the same as modern 3-woods. So distance alone isn't the reason to switch, which means it all comes down to control. If we look at spin and launch conditions, this is where it starts to get really interesting. The M2 is spinning at 2,741 and the Ping is spinning at 2,558. That's nearly 200 more spin with the M2. When it comes to descent angle, the M2 is landing on the ground at 40.2 degrees, whereas the Ping is coming in much flatter at 36.9 degrees. The difference in descent angle is largely down to the peak height of these clubs. The M2 was flying at 97.9 feet, with the Ping at 88.1 feet. The M2 launches higher, spins more, lands softer, and that is massive when it comes to control. Those spin and launch conditions are going to give you softer landings into par 5s, more stopping power, a more predictable carry number, more control in firm conditions. That 40-degree descent angle is tour level control when it comes to firm conditions. You're going to hold a lot more greens coming into par 5s with that M2 in hand. The Ping, by comparison, is much flatter and more penetrating. Great for distance, great for forgiveness, but not necessarily great for control. Now think about Brooks and the type of courses he's playing. Major championship courses, firm fairways, firm greens, and lots of pressure on par 5s to go low. If you were Brooks, would you rather have 3 extra yards of roll or 200 more spin and a steeper descent angle? This might be the answer to our question. But why has Brooks opted for the high launch 16.5-degree version of the M2? I think it's because it bridges a gap. At 16.5 degrees, it's not exactly a traditional 3-wood, it's more like a strong 4-wood. This version of the M2 is giving him a higher launch window, easier turf interaction, it's more versatile off the deck, and all 3 of these things make it more playable into greens. For a high-speed player like Brooks, a traditional 15-degree head might launch a little bit too low and come out with a little bit less spin. So I think the high launch version is giving him the ball flight he's after. And when you're one of the best players on planet Earth, you don't chase distance, you chase ball flight windows. But let's talk about smash factor again. We've got the M2 at 1.45 and we've got the Ping at 1.49. The Ping is definitely more forgiving. On mishits, it's better at maintaining its ball speed. That's why it's the most popular 3-wood of 2025. It's built for consistency across the whole face. But here's the key difference between the likes of us and Brooks Koepka. We benefit from forgiveness. He benefits from predictability. Elite players don't always want maximum spring off the club face. They want a stable feel, predictable spin, consistent launch, and a repeatable shot shape. And sometimes older heads, especially ones that players have used for many years, provide exactly that. There is something missing from this data table, but it's something that Flightscope can't measure, and that's confidence. Brooks has won majors with this club. Under pressure and on the biggest stages, this club has performed for him. So why change something that performs exactly how you expect it to? Based on the data, here's my conclusion. He's not sacrificing any speed, he's not sacrificing any carry, and he's not sacrificing any meaningful distance. But he is gaining more spin, higher peak height, steeper descent angles, more stopping power, and a trusted flight window. The M2 High Launch is producing a more controllable, high launching, softer landing shot. And for tour level golf, that is absolute gold. Modern technology isn't always better. It's different. And considering how well Brooks Koepka hits this M2, he doesn't need different. He needs to keep that thing in the bag for as long as possible. So here's the big takeaway for you watching. Just because a club is old doesn't mean it's outdated. If it fits your launch window, your spin profile, and your yardage gap, it's still a weapon. The Ping G430 Max is objectively more forgiving and longer. For most golfers, that's probably a better choice. But for elite level precision, the M2 is still a great club. And maybe that's the lesson here. Performance is more important than marketing. If you do want to try some older clubs, then Nearly New Golf Clubs is the best place to do that. They have a massive stock list and they have a 30-day trial period. You can try clubs before you buy clubs. And if you don't like them, you can always send them back. Let me know in the comments, after watching this video, would you play a 2017 fairway wood in 2026? Or are you always after the latest tech? Guys, thank you so much for watching this whole video. If you're still here and you're not yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button and I will see you next week for another video.